The shuttle descended through the clouds of Primus. Seven and Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. She had dreamed of this moment for years, and now it was finally happening. The station world spread out beneath her like a jewel floating in space, covered in towers of glass and metal that reached toward the stars. And she felt her heart beating fast in her chest. She was the first human ever admitted to the Galactic Concord Academy, and the weight of that honor sat heavy on her shoulders. Back on Earth they had called her a pioneer, a trailblazer, the hope of humanity's future among the stars. But sitting alone in this shuttle full of alien species who refused to look at her, Elena just felt small. The shuttle landed with a soft thump and the doors slid open with a hiss. Elena grabbed her single bag and stepped out into a world that felt wrong in every possible way. The gravity here was set to galactic standard, at 0.6 of Earth normal, and her first step sent her stumbling forward like a newborn deer. She caught herself against a railing and heard laughter from somewhere behind her. Her cheeks burned red, but she straightened her spine and kept walking. The air tasted strange, too clean, too filtered, missing the thousand organic scents that made Earth feel alive. She missed the smell of rain on concrete and the feeling of wind on her face. Here, everything was controlled and perfect, and sterile. A tall figure blocked her path, and Elena looked up into a face that belonged in nightmares. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like molten gold. Its mouth opened to reveal rows of serrated teeth, and it spoke in a voice like grinding stones. "You are the dirt crawler," it said, and the translator in Elena's ear made the words sound almost friendly, even though the tone was clearly not. "I am Elena Vasquez from Earth," she replied, keeping her voice steady even as her instincts screamed at her to run. The creature laughed, a horrible sound like bones breaking, and pushed past her without another word. "Welcome to the Academy." Elena thought to herself. The orientation hall was massive, filled with hundreds of students from dozens of worlds, and Elena found a seat in the back corner where she could watch without being watched. The Academy director was a being of pure light contained in a crystalline shell, and their voice echoed through the hall like music. They spoke of unity and cooperation and the great future that awaited all species who joined the Galactic Concord. Elena listened and tried to believe it. After the ceremony ended, she made her way to her assigned quarters, a small room with a bed that was too soft and a window that looked out at stars she did not recognize. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the loneliness for just a moment before pushing it away. There was no room for weakness here. A knock at her door made her jump, and she opened it to find a creature unlike any she had seen before. Being was shorter than Elena, with delicate limbs covered in pale blue skin that glowed faintly with bioluminescent patterns. Large eyes the color of amethysts blinked up at her, and the creature's voice was soft and musical. "Hello. I am Kethra of the Villani people, and I believe we are neighbors." Elena felt the first genuine smile in days spread across her face. "I am Elena. Please come in." Kethra entered the room with careful steps, her glow brightening slightly in what Elena would later learn was a sign of happiness. "I have read about your world," Kethra said as she settled onto the floor, her species apparently preferring not to use chairs. The data files call it Deathworld 7 and describe it as one of the most hostile environments ever cataloged. Elena laughed at that, surprising herself. "It is just home to me. We have trees and oceans and cities full of people who love and work and dream just like anywhere else." Kethra's pattern shifted to a deeper blue. "You speak of it with such warmth." The files made it sound like a place of constant death and struggle. "There is struggle," Elena admitted, "but there is also beauty. Perhaps more beauty because we know how hard we fought to find it. They talked for hours, and Elena learned that Kethra was a scholarship student from a poor family, the first of her people to attend the academy in decades. She was studying xenobiology and dreamed of discovering new forms of life on unexplored worlds. In turn, Elena shared her own dreams of building bridges between humanity and the wider galaxy, of proving that her people were more than the savage survivors the data files described. As the station's artificial night cycle began and the lights dimmed, Kethra's glow provided soft illumination in the small room. "I must warn you about something," Kethra said, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "There's a student here named Torvax Kelm, and he is very dangerous." Elena leaned forward, listening carefully. "He is a Drethi, the tall-scaled ones, and his father is a powerful senator in the Dominion government. Torvax and his followers rule this academy through fear, and no one dares to stand against him." "What does he do?" Elena asked. Kithra's glow dimmed until she was almost invisible in the darkness. "He hurts people. He destroys careers. He takes whatever he wants, and the administration does nothing because his family donates more credits than most planets earn in a year." Elena felt cold anger settling in her stomach, a familiar feeling she had learned to control long ago. "Has he hurt you?" "Not yet. I am too small and unimportant to notice." "But he has seen you, Elena. Everyone saw you arrive today, and Torvax does not like new things." Elena reached out and gently touched Kethra's arm, feeling the cool smoothness of her skin. "I did not come here to fight. I came here to learn and to build something better." "I hope that is enough," Kethra whispered. But her voice held doubt. That night, Elena lay awake in her too-soft bed and stared at the unfamiliar stars. Outside her window, she thought about her family back on Earth. A mother who had cried at the shuttle port. Her father who had simply hugged her and said he was proud. She thought about all the humans who would come after her if she succeeded, and all the doors that would close if she failed. She thought about Torvax Kelm and his golden eyes and his teeth. Like knives on Earth, she had learned to survive hurricanes and earthquakes and predators that could kill with a single bite. She had learned to endure heat that could boil water and cold that could freeze blood. She had learned that the universe was hostile and uncaring, and that survival belonged to those who refused to give up. The academy would be no different. She would endure, she would learn, and she would not let anyone break her, not even a monster with a senator for a father. Elena closed her eyes and let the artificial darkness wrap around her like a blanket. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new enemies, but tonight she would rest. She would need her strength for what was coming. The weeks passed slowly, and Elena learned to navigate her new world one careful step at a time. She discovered that the low gravity was both a blessing and a curse, making her feel light as a feather, but also making every movement feel strange and uncontrolled. She trained herself in secret, learning to move with precision in this lighter world, where her earthborn muscles could send her flying with a careless step in her classes. She excelled, and her professors noted her quick mind and tireless work ethic. The academy taught subjects that human schools had never dreamed of, from quantum mechanics to xenolinguistics to the history of civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth even existed. Elena absorbed it all like a sponge, staying awake late into the night cycle to study, and waking early to study more. But academic success did not bring acceptance. The other students watched her with a mixture of curiosity and disgust, whispering behind their appendages and tentacles. Whenever she passed, they called her Dirt Crawler and Gravity Slave and Deathworlder. And these names were not meant as compliments. Storv Kelm made his presence known slowly, like a predator circling wounded prey. The first incident was small, just her assignments deleted from the academy network the night before. They were Elena stayed awake until morning, rewriting everything from memory and turned them in on time. The second incident was worse. Her quarters ransacked and her belongings scattered across the hallway for everyone to see. She picked up each item without a word and put them back in their place. The third incident made her hands shake with rage. Someone had sent a message to Earth using her identity codes. A message full of slurs and insults directed at the Galactic Elena spent 3 days proving she had not sent it, and the investigation cleared her name. But the damage was done. The other students looked at her with even more suspicion, and the whispers grew louder through it all. Tarvax watched from a distance with those golden eyes and that terrible smile. He never touched her directly, never left evidence that could connect him to the harassment. But Elena knew, and he knew that she knew, and that was part of the game. Why do you not report him? Kethra asked one evening as they sat together in Elena's quarters. Elena shook her head, feeling tired in a way that sleep could not fix. There was no proof, and his family owns half the people who would investigate. I promised my family I would make this work, and getting into a fight with a senator's son is not making it work. Kethra's bioluminescent patterns flickered with distress. But this is not fair. Fair is a human concept, Elena said with a bitter laugh. The universe does not care about fair. She thought about the earthquakes that had leveled cities on Earth, and the diseases that had killed millions, and the predators that hunted without mercy. Fairness was a story humans told themselves to make the darkness easier to bear. The real world belonged to those with power, and right now Tarvax Kelm had all the power. Then came the day when everything changed. Elena was walking to her advanced physics class when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The sound of Kethra crying. She rounded a corner and found her friend surrounded by Tarvax and 3 of his followers. Kethra was pressed against a wall, her glow dimmed to almost nothing, her small body shaking with terror. Tarvax loomed over her, one clawed hand resting on the wall beside her head. Your scholarship is under review, little lightbug, he was saying in that grinding voice. My father sits on the funding committee, and he found some irregularities in your application. Very serious irregularities that could end your academic career. Please, Kethra whispered. I have done nothing wrong. That does not matter, Tarvax laughed. What matters is what my father says you have done. Elena felt something shift inside her chest. Something old and primal that lived in the bones of every human who had ever survived Earth's endless trials. She had promised herself she would endure, that she would not fight, that she would keep her head down and do what she came here to do. But some things were more important than promises. Leave her alone. Her voice cut through the hallway like a blade, and every head turned toward Tarvax, straightened to his full height. Nearly 3 feet taller than Elena, and his golden eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. The dirt crawler speaks, he announced to his followers. How entertaining. Elena walked forward until she stood between Tarvax and Kethra, her heart pounding but her face calm. She has done nothing to you. Find someone else to torment. Tarvax leaned down until his face was inches from hers, and his breath smelled like copper and rotting meat. Everyone here is mine to torment, little human. That is how power works. You would know that if your species had evolved beyond throwing rocks and scratching in the dirt. Elena, please. Kethra whimpered from behind her. Do not do this. But Elena did not move, and she did not look away from those terrible golden eyes. You think you are a predator, she said quietly. But you have never hunted anything that could fight back. Tarvax's followers shifted uncomfortably, and one of them laughed nervously. Is this creature threatening you, Tarvax? The Drethi smiled, showing all those rows of serrated teeth. I believe she is. How delightful. Tell me, dirt crawler, what exactly do you think you can do to me? Elena said nothing. She had learned long ago that predators expected their prey to run, to beg, to show fear. She did none of these things. She simply stood there, small and quiet and utterly unafraid. And something in her stillness made Torvax's smile flicker for just a moment. "You are either very brave or very stupid," he said. "On Earth we have a saying," Elena replied. "Do not start fights, but always finish them." Torvax laughed again, but there was an edge to it now, a hint of uncertainty that had not been there before. "We will continue this conversation another time, human." When there are fewer witnesses, he turned and walked away, his followers falling into step behind him. Lena waited until they were gone before letting out the breath she had been holding. Kethra grabbed her arm with trembling hands. "That was incredibly dangerous. You have made an enemy of the most powerful student in this academy." "He was already my enemy," Elena said. "Now he just knows that I know it." She looked down at her friend, at those beautiful amethyst eyes filled with fear and gratitude. "I will not let them hurt you, Kethra. I promise." It was a promise she intended to keep no matter what it cost her. The next few days were quiet, but Elena could feel the storm building. Torvax watched her from across crowded rooms with hatred burning in those golden eyes. His followers whispered and pointed. Wherever she went, something was coming, and Elena could feel it in her bones the same way her ancestors had felt storms rolling across ancient plains. She was not wrong. The common hall was crowded when Elena entered. Students from a dozen worlds gathered in small groups, studying and socializing and living their lives as if nothing was wrong. She had come to meet Kethra for their weekly study session. A small moment of normalcy in a life that had become anything but normal. The air felt wrong the moment she stepped inside, charged with an energy that made her skin prickle and her muscles tense. Too many eyes turned toward her, and too many conversations stopped mid-sentence. Elaine knew a trap when she saw one. Torvax Count stood in the center of the hall with his followers arranged behind him like soldiers, awaiting orders. His golden eyes found her immediately, and his lipless mouth stretched into that terrible smile. "There she is," his voice carried across the suddenly silent room. "The little dirt crawler who thinks she can threaten me." Elena considered turning around and walking away, but she knew that would only delay the fight. Inevitable. Whatever was going to happen had been building for weeks, and there was no stopping it now. She walked forward, her steps careful and controlled in the low gravity, and stopped a few feet away from the massive Drethi. "I never threatened you," she said calmly. "I simply asked you to leave my friend alone." "You stood against me," Torvax growled. "In front of witnesses, you challenged my authority and made me look weak. That cannot be tolerated." Around them, the other students had formed a loose circle, watching with a mixture of fear and excitement. Elena spotted Kethra at the edge of the crowd, her glow pulsing rapidly with distress. She wanted to tell her friend to leave, to run and get help, but there was no time. "I do not want to fight you," Elena said. And she meant it. "Then kneel," Torvax replied. "Kneel before me and beg forgiveness, and perhaps I will show mercy." Elena looked up at him, at this creature who had been born into power and privilege and had never known what it meant to struggle for survival. She thought about her ancestors, who had crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts, who had fought predators with nothing but sticks and stones, who had survived extinction events that had wiped out entire species. She thought about what it meant to come from a world where everything wanted to kill you. "No," she said simply. Torvax moved faster than she expected, his clawed hand swinging toward her face in a vicious backhand strike. He was not trying to hurt her. He was trying to kill Iran. Any other being, the blow would have shattered bone and pulped flesh, ending the fight before it began. But Elena was not any other being. She saw the strike coming and let it land, turning her head with the impact to bleed off. Some of the force pain exploded across her face, and she tasted blood in her mouth, but she did not fall. She did not even stumble. The room went absolutely silent as Elena turned her head back toward Torvax. Blood trickling from her split lip and a bruise already forming on her cheek. His eyes widened with something she had never seen there before. Fear. That, Elena said quietly, was a mistake. Everything humans had evolved to do was built for exactly this moment. Her bones were dense as stone, forged by a gravity that would crush most galactic species. Her muscles were steel cables designed to propel her body through an atmosphere thick as soup. Her reflexes had been honed by millions of years of running from predators and hunting prey across endless plains. And in this gravity, at 0.6 of Earth normal, she was something else entirely. She was a god among mortals. Elena moved into the watching students. She seemed to disappear and reappear like a ghost. One moment she was standing before Torvax, and the next she was inside his guard, too close for him to use his superior reach. Her fist drove into his throat where his scales were thinnest, and she felt cartilage crunch beneath her knuckles. Torvax choked and staggered back, but Elena was already moving, her knee rising to strike the nerve cluster that Kethra had once mentioned during one of their study sessions. The Drethi screamed, an awful sound like metal tearing, and his legs buckled beneath him. His followers rushed forward to help their leader, and Elena dealt with them like a hurricane dealing with leaves. The first one swung a tentacle at her head, and she ducked beneath it, driving her elbow into what passed for his ribs. The second tried to grab her from behind, and she threw him over her shoulder with a technique her grandmother had taught her years ago. The third simply ran. In 4 seconds, it was over. Torvax Kelm lay on the floor of the common hall, gasping for breath and clutching his throat, his golden eyes filled with pain and shock and disbelief. His followers were scattered around him, groaning and trying to understand what had just happened to them. Elena stood over them, not even breathing hard, her fists still raised and ready. Blood dripped from her split lip onto the polished floor. The silence in the room was absolute. Then Kethra's voice cut through it, high and frightened. Elena. She blinked, and the red haze that had settled over her vision began to clear. He looked around at the watching students, at their expressions of horror and amazement and fear, and she slowly lowered her hands. Torvax tried to push himself up and failed, collapsing back to the floor with a wet cough. "You," he wheezed, "you are dead. My father will destroy you." Elena looked down at him and felt no anger, no satisfaction, only a deep and terrible weariness. "You hit me first," she said. "In front of all these witnesses, you struck a blow that should have killed me. Remember that when you explained this to your father." She turned and walked through the crowd, which parted before her like water before a ship. Kethra fell into step beside her, glowing so brightly that she was almost painful to look at. "How?" her friend whispered. "How did you do that?" Elena wiped the blood from her lip and looked at her hand, at the knuckles that were already beginning to bruise. "I am from Earth," she said. "We are not fragile." Behind them, she could hear Torvax's followers calling for medical assistance, and she could hear the whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire. She knew that her life had just changed forever in ways she could not yet imagine. The quiet human girl who kept her head down and studied hard was gone. In her place was something the galaxy had never seen before. A human who had fought back and won. They made it back to Elena's quarters before her hands started shaking. She sat down on the edge of her bed and stared at the wall and tried to process what she had done. "You beat him," Kethra said with wonder in her voice. "You beat the most feared student in the academy in front of everyone." "I hurt him," Elena corrected. "There is a difference." She could still feel the impact of her fist against his throat, the crunch of cartilage, and the spray of blood on Earth. She had been taught to defend herself from a young age, taught by parents who knew that the world was dangerous and that their daughter needed to be able to protect herself. but she had never wanted to use those skills like this. What happens now? Kethra asked. Elena shook her head slowly, watching the stars outside her window spin in their eternal dance. Now we wait and see who comes for us first, the Academy or his father. She had a feeling it would not be a long wait. The storm had finally broken, and there was no shelter from what was coming. All she could do was stand firm and hope that she was strong enough to survive it. The summons came within the hour, a cold official message demanding Elena's presence before the Academy Tribune. Kethra wanted to come with her, but Elena refused, knowing that her friend's association with her had already caused enough trouble. She walked to the tribunal chamber alone, her footsteps echoing in empty corridors as other students pressed themselves against walls. To let her password had spread fast. The chamber was a grand circular room with high ceilings and seats, arranged in tiers like an ancient amphitheater. The Academy director floated in their crystalline shell at the center, surrounded by a dozen other officials whose species Elena did not recognize, and there, seated in a place of honor with guards at his side, was Senator Kelm. Looked like an older version of Torvax. His scales faded to a dull crimson, and his golden eyes, burning with cold hatred. Elena took her place in the center of the room and felt those eyes boring into her like drills. Elena Vasquez of Earth. The director's musical voice rang out. You stand accused of assault causing grievous bodily harm against Torvax Kelm, heir to the Kelm dynasty. How do you respond to these charges? Elena lifted her chin and spoke clearly. I acted in self-defense against an unprovoked attack. Senator Kelm laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Self-defense. This primitive creature broke my son's throat and injured 3 of his companions. She's a savage animal who should never have been allowed into civilized society. Your son struck me first, Elena replied, keeping her voice steady. He intended to kill me with that blow. I defended myself and used only the force necessary to end the threat. The senator leaned forward, his claws gripping the arms of his chair. My son would never attack without provocation. You clearly threatened him and forced his hand. Everyone knows that Deathworlders are violent by nature. Elena felt something in her pocket, a small hard shape that she had almost forgotten about. Her personal recorder. She had started carrying it weeks ago, when the harassment began, hoping to document evidence that might help her case. Someday she had never imagined it would capture something like this. I have evidence, she said. Chamber fell silent, and the director's light pulsed with interest. What evidence? Elena pulled out the small device and held it up. My personal recorder. It captured the entire incident, including your son striking me first while I stood armed and made no aggressive movements. Senator Kelm's scales shifted to a darker shade. That device could have been tampered with. Its evidence is meaningless. Then have your experts examine it, Elena replied. I have nothing to hide. The director gestured, and a technician floated forward to take the recorder. For several long minutes the chamber waited in tense silence as the footage was verified and prepared for display. Then the ZES holographic projectors hummed to life, and the scene played out for everyone to see. The footage was crystal clear, showing Elena walking into the common hall, showing Torvax confronting her, showing her calm refusal to kneel, and showing Torvax striking her with a blow that should have killed any normal being. The below gasps that filled the chamber were audible. But what came next was even more shocking. The footage showed Elena taking the hit and barely moving, showed her turning back with blood on her face and fire in her eyes, showed her dismantling Torvax and his followers. In 4 seconds flat, when it was over, the chamber was silent. Senator Kelm's face had gone pale beneath his scales, and his claws had gouged deep scratches in the arms of his chair. The director spoke first, their voice thoughtful. The footage clearly shows Torvax Kelm striking first with lethal intent. Under Academy law, this constitutes unprovoked assault. She provoked him. The senator shouted, "She refused to show proper respect to her betters." "Refusing to kneel is not a crime," one of the other officials observed. Even for a human, Elena watched as the tide began to turn. Watched as the officials whispered among themselves and shot nervous glances at both her and the senator, but she knew this was not over within hours. The footage had leaked onto the galactic networks. Elena did not know who released it. Perhaps a sympathetic official, or perhaps someone who simply wanted to watch the chaos unfold. Either way, the result was the same. Video of a small human girl taking a killing blow and then defeating one of the galaxy's apex predators went viral across 1,000 worlds. Xenologists flooded the networks with analysis, pulling up data files on Earth that had been buried and ignored for decades. They talked about human bone density, 3 times that of most galactic species. They talked about human muscle efficiency, designed to function in gravity that would crush other beings flat. They talked about human endurance, the ability to chase prey for days without rest, to survive wounds that would kill any other creature, to keep fighting when all hope was lost. They talked about what humans could do in low gravity, how they became something superhuman when freed from the crushing weight of their birth world, and they talked about what Elena had not done. She had beaten Torvax easily. That much was clear to anyone watching. But she had not killed him. She had used exactly enough force to end the threat, and no more. Showing a level of control that most species could barely imagine. The galaxy had always thought of humans as primitive survivors, barely evolved animals clinging to a nightmare world through sheer stubborn refusal to die now. They saw something different. They saw a species that had been forged in the hottest fire the universe could provide and had come out as something extraordinary. Messages began flooding Elena's communication device. Requests for interviews from news networks, offers of support from human communities across the galaxy. Even a few tentative messages of respect from other students at the Academy. But not everyone was pleased. Senator Kelm used every bit of his political power to bury the story, threatening networks that ran the footage and pressuring officials to suppress the investigation. For a few days it seemed like he might succeed. Then the other testimonies began to appear. Students who had been silent for years started coming forward, telling stories of Torvax's cruelty and the Academy's willingness to look the other way. They told of destroyed careers and broken bodies and lives ruined by a predator who had never faced consequences for anything. Cathra was among the first, her soft voice trembling but determined as she described the harassment she had witnessed and experienced. Scandal grew beyond anyone's ability to control. Academy officials who had protected Torvax were exposed and removed from their positions. Donors who had bought silence began distancing themselves from the Kelm family and humans across the galaxy. Workers and servants and settlers who had always been dismissed as inferior began to stand a little taller. Elena watched it all unfold from her small quarters, feeling like she was standing in the eye of a hurricane. She had not wanted any of this. She had just wanted to learn and to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. But sometimes the universe had other plans, and sometimes the only way forward was through the storm. The final tribunal hearing took place 3 weeks after the incident in the common hall. Elena walked into the chamber with her head held high, wearing the simple clothes she had brought from Earth and carrying nothing but the quiet certainty that she had done what was right. The room was different this time, packed with observers and journalists and representatives from a dozen governments who had traveled to witness the verdict. Senator Kelm sat in his place of honor, but he looked diminished somehow, his scales dull and his golden eyes tired. The director's crystalline shell pulsed with colors that Elena had learned to recognize as formal authority. This tribunal has reviewed all evidence and testimony regarding the incident between Elena Vasquez and Torvax Keln. The musical voice announced, "We are prepared to deliver our judgment." Elena felt her heart beating fast, but kept her face calm. She had learned long ago that showing fear only encouraged predators. The evidence clearly demonstrates that Torvax Keln initiated physical contact with lethal intent, the director continued. Elena Vasquez acted in lawful self-defense, using appropriate force to neutralize the threat. Senator Keln rose from his seat, his voice sharp with barely controlled rage. "This is an outrage. You cannot seriously be suggesting that my son was at fault, Senator Keln. You will remain silent or you will be removed," the director replied with cold authority. "Your family's influence has corrupted this institution for far too long. That ends today." The senator's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He slowly sank back into his chair, looking like a creature who had just realized the ground beneath him had disappeared. "Elena Vasquez," the director addressed her directly, "you are cleared of all charges. Furthermore, this tribunal commends you for your restraint in a situation where lethal force would have been legally justified." A murmur ran through the crowd, and Elena let out a breath she had not realized she was holding, but the director was not finished. "Torvax Keln is hereby expelled from the Galactic Concord Academy effective immediately. Additionally, this tribunal has uncovered evidence of systematic harassment and abuse spanning several years. Criminal charges have been filed with the appropriate authorities." Senator Keln made a sound like a wounded animal. "You cannot do this. I will appeal to the Concord Council itself." "That is your right," the director replied. "But I should inform you that the council has already begun an investigation into your family's practices. Your political career is effectively over, Senator." For a moment, Elena almost felt sorry for him then. She remembered Kethra pressed against that wall, trembling with fear, and the sympathy vanished like morning mist. The hearing ended, and Elena walked out into a corridor filled with people who wanted to speak with her. Journalists shouted questions about human capabilities and her plans for the future. Representatives offered opportunities and alliances and things she could not quite understand. Through the crowd, she spotted a familiar glow and pushed her way toward it. Kethra threw her arms around Elena and held tight, her bioluminescent patterns blazing with joy. "You did it," her friend whispered. "You actually did it." Elena hugged her back, feeling tears prick at her eyes for the first time since this whole nightmare began. "We did it," she corrected. "I could not have survived any of this without you." They stood there for a long moment, two beings from different worlds who had found something precious in each other. When they finally pulled apart, Kethra was glowing so brightly that the nearest journalists had to shield their eyes. "What happens now?" The Villani asked. Elena looked around at the chaos surrounding them and smiled. "Now we go back to class. I have a physics exam next week, and I refuse to let any of this affect my grades." Kethra laughed, a beautiful sound like crystal bells. "You are the strangest creature I have ever met." "I am from Earth," Elena replied. "We are all a little strange." That night they sat together in Elena's quarters, watching the news feeds as the story continued to spread across the galaxy. Humans were being featured in programs that had never shown interest in them before. Scientists and artists and leaders from Earth speaking about their hopes for the future. The narrative was changing. Humanity was no longer seen as a collection of savage survivors from a death world, but as a species of remarkable potential, tempered by hardship, into something extraordinary. And everywhere the story was the same. A small human girl who had refused to back down, who had taken a killing blow and kept standing, who had shown mercy when none was expected. Lena watched it all with mixed feelings. She had never wanted to be a symbol or a hero or anything more than a student trying to make a better future. But sometimes the universe chose its champions whether they wanted to be chosen or not. Are you afraid? Cathra asked suddenly. Lena considered the question seriously, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle. My grandmother survived a hurricane when she was young, she said finally. The wind tore the roof off her house and the water rose until it was up to her neck. She stood there for 6 hours holding my infant mother above the flood until rescue came. Cathra listened with wide amethyst eyes. My grandfather once fought a bear to protect his children. He has the scars to prove it. He says the bear ran away first. Elena smiled at the memory of those stories told around kitchen tables on quiet evenings. My mother grew up in a city of 30 million people. She rode underground trains every day through tunnels that could collapse at any moment. She breathed air that was more poison than oxygen. She walked streets where any stranger could be a threat. She looked at her friend, at this gentle, glowing creature who had become so precious to her. I come from a world where survival is never guaranteed, where the very planet seems determined to kill everything that lives on it. My people learned long ago that fear is a luxury we cannot afford. She reached out and took Cathra's hand in her own. Torvak's Keln was the least scary thing I have faced since I left Earth. Cathra squeezed her hand, and her glow settled into a warm, steady pulse. The galaxy has so much to learn about your people, and we have so much to learn about the galaxy. Elena replied, that is why I came here. Not to fight, but to build bridges. To show everyone that humanity has more to offer than violence and survival. She looked out at the stars, at the endless darkness filled with countless worlds and possibilities. There will be others who try to hurt us, who fear what we represent, who see our strength and feel threatened. Her voice grew quiet but steady. But we will not let fear make us cruel. We will not become the monsters they expect us to be. We will be better than that. The artificial night deepened around them, and somewhere in the academy a new day was beginning. Elena Vasquez, first human of the Galactic Concord Academy, closed her eyes and finally let herself rest. She had survived the storm and she had emerged from it stronger than before. The galaxy would never forget what happened here. They would never forget the lesson they had learned. Never strike a Deathworlder unless you are prepared for them to get back up, and never underestimate the children of Earth. They were forged in fire and tempered by hardship, and nothing in the universe could break them, not as long as they had each other, not as long as they remembered who they were and where they came from. The stars burned eternal in the darkness, and humanity had finally taken its place among them. This was only the beginning.